Getting taken off the shelves today in Canada. Look at this video here as it happening. This is Brown-Forman's Jack Daniels coming off the shelves there. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau even asked Canadians over the weekend to stop buying Kentucky bourbon. They were all getting ready for President Donald Trump's 25% tariff to take effect, but then just before 5 tonight, Trudeau and the president coming to a tentative agreement to hold off on the tariff for Canada for 30 days.
There are many ways for you to do your part. It might mean checking the labels at the supermarket and picking Canadian-made products. It might mean opting for Canadian rye over Kentucky bourbon, or foregoing Florida orange juice altogether.
And we can't let them take advantage of the U.S. They don't take our agricultural product for the most part. They don't take our cars.
China also hit with 10% tariffs on top of those already in place from Donald Trump's first term. But the tariffs on Mexico this morning were also put on a 30-day hold. After a meeting with Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum, the country agreed to send 10,000 national troops to the border to help contain drug trafficking. Back here at home, American whiskey sales are down, dropping around 1.3% last year. That's the first decrease for the bourbon industry in more than 20 years. Many distilleries are stuck with more supply now than they know what to do with. Where does Kentucky's $9 billion signature business go from here? It's a question we've been asking, and Isaiah Kim Martinez has been talking to experts and people working in the industry. And Isaiah, you know, there was talk. There's always been talk. When would the boom hit? But right now, there's other challenges that people really didn't see coming.
Sure, the question's all about the hangover, Doug, right? That's been sort of the word that's been used. Other words I'm hearing are volatile, tumultuous, just to describe this market. Stakeholders acknowledge there was an overprojection during COVID, but they also tell me they're confident bourbon's best days are still ahead. They may just look different.
This all here would be consumer area for tasting, drinking, the bars here.
Staring down a decline in bourbon sales across the U.S.
Event space number 2, which is the larger one.
Victor Yarbrough is expanding.
We're going to put some windows and doors on this side of the walls.
This warehouse will soon be Bro Brothers Distillery's second location in Louisville by Waterfront Park. 6 times the size of their home base in Park Hill.
Big Fort Bridge is right there, so we're right here in the midst of downtown.
What Yarbrough hopes will be a hub for tourism.
It's entertainment at the end of the day, so people want to be entertained. They want something to do.
It's a critical moment for the bourbon industry.
It's This Week in Bourbon, and here's our top headlines for today.
Falling back to earth after an astronomical rise in popularity, peaking during the pandemic.
Producers were putting down more whiskey than what they thought was going to be projected for the next 10 or 15 years.
Kenny Coleman of Pursuit Spirits runs the Bourbon Pursuit podcast, reaching more than 50,000 listeners every month. His big concern right now, the volatility of the barrel market.
There's just so much available right now that there's no home for it.
Then you have the cultural shift, a younger generation simply not drinking as much.
The idea of doing California sober, or they're not really looking for that, and they'd rather have THC seltzers. And for the past couple of years, we've always said, who's going to be the first person to come out with a bourbon and cannabis hybrid?
I talked to Bob Houselayden over at U of L.
The U.S. business is at best flat. International business is growing. So you're going to have to shift something.
He's the school's program director for the Distilled Spirits Business Certificate, as well as a former Brown-Forman executive.
This is a fairly large restructuring, you're absolutely right, but it's probably something that has to happen.
The Louisville-based spirits giant in January announced a layoff of 12% of its workforce, shutting down its cooperage by the airport, a move toward outsourcing barrels instead.
I think bourbon's going to have a few rough years, but fortunately, if the international market continues to grow at 6.5%, that'll absorb what we're putting away.
Problem is, selling bourbon overseas is getting more complicated. President Trump has threatened tariffs as high as 25% on Mexico and Canada, sparking fears of a trade war.
A part of it is a waiting game. It is a waiting game.
Distilleries are also watching that March 31st deadline, when the U.S. is set to get hit with 50% tariffs by the European Union unless the president steps in.
Do we go ahead and pull the trigger now, or do we go ahead and say, hey, let's wait till March, fill things out a little bit more, let's reshift our focus.
While larger drinks companies are stockpiling product overseas, smaller ones like Bro Brothers are considering pivoting toward other countries without tariffs.
This is a prep area right here.
Yarbrough doesn't believe the bourbon boom is over.
I want people to stay and enjoy themselves.
He, like many others, are leaning into the experience, the bourbon tours here in Kentucky, to continue to expand that audience.
A couple that we had over the other night, they're talking about the places they've gone on a bourbon tour. They don't drink, period. They don't drink at all, but they're on the bourbon trail and loving it and talking about it.
Quick note here, Bro Brothers plans to open its second distillery by Waterfront Park in time for Thunder and Derby. Meantime, Pursuit Spirits is set to open a new visitor experience on Whiskey Row. That will be this April. Doug.
Isaiah, thank you. More of our coverage on this today. Kentucky politicians saying proposed tariffs will be hurtful to our state's economy. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear put out a copy of his letter that he sent to Kentucky's congressional delegation today, saying, quote, federal tariffs imposed yesterday have already led to retaliatory actions on Kentucky bourbon that will be costly, disruptive, and harmful to the many thousands of Kentucky men and women who support their families working in the industry.